I'm a full-time working mom to two amazing boys. I'm Gina Stevenson, and I am a miraculous mom.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Miraculous Mamas podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Joy, and we believe in empowering women through storytelling and education. Last week, we talked with Candace from Your Hormone Balance, which was super interesting. I learned a lot from her. I didn't know that B vitamins were so essential postpartum to helping balance your hormones. So I'm not taking a supplement yet, but I did start using my coconut aminos because she said that they're a good source for that. But I would love to definitely connect with her. Make sure you take advantage of that code that she gave us at the end of the episode to get a discount on your hormone test if you want to take one. And today we are going to be talking with Kristyn from the Fertility Tribe. I know that I've seen her all over. I mean, she's been on the Today Show, had articles published in magazines, so many different stuff, and has created this amazing community for women in whatever part of their fertility journey that they're on. So I'm super excited for her to talk with us. Before we dive into the interview, make sure that if you're listening that you're following us on Instagram and that you leave us a review, give us a 5-star rating, leave us a review, and share. The more that you guys share this episode, the more that people will see it, the more it gets seen, people can hear about it and be a part of our community with us. Also, make sure that you reach out to me and let me know who you want to come on the podcast and what topics you want covered. I'm super excited about some guests that I have coming up, and I'm super excited to continue to learn and grow with you guys. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start the interview with Kristyn. All right, everyone, I'm here with Kristyn Hodgdon. Did I say it right? Hodgdon.
Hodgdon, yep.
Okay, sorry. I'm here with Kristyn Hodgdon, and she's the founder of the Fertility Tribe, and she has graciously agreed to come on the podcast to share with us her passion, why she started the Fertility Tribe, and to share her story with us. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. Like you said, I'm very passionate about all things fertility. I myself went through about a year-long fertility journey to get pregnant with my twins. I was diagnosed with PCOS a few months after coming off the birth control pill. Never got my cycle back and sort of was thrust straight into the world of fertility treatments. My doctor said, you're not ovulating, so you can't get pregnant if you were to try on your own. So, and in one respect, I was grateful that she kind of I didn't have to go on that journey of, trying to no avail, because a lot of couples do end up trying for a year or two before they seek treatment. But I also felt like I was under 30 and there I was sitting in a fertility clinic waiting room, and my husband and I hadn't even really been actively trying yet. I just knew that I really wanted to be a mom. And now I was up against this diagnosis that felt scary and it felt time sensitive. And so, so I have a publishing background. I worked in book publishing for like 9 years. And I love writing. And so I started the Fertility Tribe as a personal blog, sort of as, what I wish I had known going in, because you walk into that fertility clinic waiting room and no one's smiling, no one's looking up from their phones. Everyone is sort of ashamed to be there. And when you look at the statistics, 1 in 8 couples struggle to get pregnant or sustain a pregnancy. And, it's pretty staggering and common. And then to go where there are literally other women who are going through the same exact thing and no one is even, cracking a smile, it feels very isolating. And at the time, I had no friends who were even trying to conceive or let alone had kids. So, besides like my husband and my mom, I really didn't have a big support system when it came to the specific thing I was going through. So I didn't want anyone else to feel the way I did. And so I started, writing and started an Instagram page, and it turned into me telling my own story. And then I realized, I'm not the only one going through this. There has to be so many other women and men who have, not an easy path to parenthood. And so now the Fertility Tribe as it exists today is this amazing community where we share the whole spectrum of paths to parenthood. So from IUI to IVF to surrogacy and adoption. So you can search pretty much any of those things on our site, DonorEgg IVF, and you'll find stories. And I think what's so important about that is, if your doctor tells you you need donor eggs, that's a really traumatic thing to hear. And it's a grieving process. And to be able to read inspiring stories from other women who have had that same moment, but have kind of come out on the other side, or are now, moms that have babies that they can't imagine not being theirs, even though they don't share their DNA. It's really empowering. And so it's just become this really wonderful space for people to, say, no way, I thought I was the only one. Because even though it's definitely being talked about more, it's still something that is not as talked about as I think it should be. And people say a lot of the wrong things.
Right. Well, I think it's something that's not talked about until you're faced with it or going through it.
Exactly.
I'd love to, you said a lot of people say the wrong things. So I'd love to touch on that too, because that's one of those things that, that you might not know what to say to somebody who's struggling, or, I'm sure one of the things that people hate hearing is like, oh, try not to stress. When you don't stress about it, then you'll like magically have a baby, like just comments like that. Like what are the things not to say?
So I think, I guess first and foremost, infertility is a disease, and I have PCOS, there's women with endometriosis, diminished ovarian reserve, premature ovarian failure. There's so many things that are causing this, obstacle. If you got diagnosed with a medical condition, you wouldn't be telling someone, just stay positive. You'd be like, oh, I'm really sorry about that. Are you feeling better? So I think that's the first point to make. And then, a lot of people, like in my case, people were like, you're still so young, it'll happen. And then I think with pregnancy loss, it's really important to not say the wrong thing. And that's something I've learned since starting the Fertility Tribe. At least it was early. At least you could get pregnant. At least, really all these at least statements. And it's like, my baby was there and then now it's not. And I lost my child. And so it's like placating, like people want to say things that they think are going to make you feel better. But if you really put yourself in that person's shoes, like if you just lost your baby, would you want to be told, oh, you can just try again? Like that's not. So I think going through the whole process has really made me like more empathetic and like think twice before I just say this statement, like this generic statement that is sort of just like the first thing that pops into your head. Like really think about who you're talking to and what it might want to hear. I mean, I still get comments like, oh, because I have a boy and a girl twins, and I get, one and done, one of each, you're good, you're done. And like, I have embryos left in storage and I'm like, well, I don't want to be done, but like people just say things. It's bizarre.
Right. No, I agree. There's also language that you might say that I know we've talked about on the podcast before. I think it's just for lack of conversation, and also like part of our culture of like you get married, then people are like, oh, when are you having kids? And that could be even just really hurtful to the couple that's been trying for years or even just been trying for 6 months and found out that they have something, or they're going to have to do fertility treatments, or there is some obstacle in the way. There's this kind of order of events that we're supposed to go through, and that just doesn't happen that way for everybody. So it's kind of like, when are you having kids? Oh, why haven't you had kids yet? And it's like, that's none of your business.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And, you know, even like, when are you having a second?
Yeah.
You know, are you having, like, it's just, you know, some people, like, secondary infertility is very prevalent. Like, you had no problem getting pregnant with your first child. And then there's almost even more of a stigma with that, because people are like, oh, well, at least you have one. And it's like, no, but I really pictured a big family. And, you know, so I think I don't fault anyone. I think it's hard to understand unless you've been in those shoes. But one of the reasons I chose to be open with my family is that, like, I knew my dad, my mother-in-law were going to be, after we got married, like, very much, when am I having grandkids? And I just didn't want to deal with those comments. Others choose to be more private and kind of just take those comments as they come. Also, in the age of social media, it's really hard because, like, pregnancy announcements and gender reveals and, you know, all of those things can be really, really difficult when you're going through something like this. So
We're going to take a quick break to talk about one of my favorite partners on here, and that is BetterHelp. I think it is so important to take control of your mental health and to feel no shame around that. I love using BetterHelp because I've been to therapy in my past, and motherhood has just brought up so many different issues in my life. Just, you know, maybe things I hadn't dealt with before and different triggers. I feel like children are such an amazing mirror for us to reflect and look at the things in our life that we need to work on. And I love using BetterHelp because they are convenient, they're affordable, you can communicate in a way that feels comfortable for you, and they have amazing licensed counselors that will start communicating with you within 24 hours as soon as you sign up with them. So whether you're struggling with depression, stress, anxiety, relationships, motherhood, anger, self-esteem, grief, processing what's going on in the world, BetterHelp is there for you. And everything you share is always confidential. They are professional, and so many people are using them. In fact, they are recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states because they are such an amazing tool and resource for you to take control of your mental health. And I want you to start living your happiest life today. And as a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting betterhelp.com/mamas. And you can join over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mamas. I remember I had posted a photo of my husband and I on social media, and somebody had commented below like, oh, I see still no babies yet. And I had actually just had a miscarriage. And I didn't take it like hurtfully, but I'm like, that is like, I don't know you. And like, it wasn't something that we had shared openly yet, and that we had started trying, and that, I got pregnant, and we were so excited, and we were like, let's wait until, they say you have to wait till 12 weeks to announce, but we'll wait until like this date to tell our families. But then like, we just couldn't even contain it. So we went ahead and told them. And then like a few days later, I miscarried, so it's like, you get excited where the baby was due like on my grandpa's birthday, who had passed 10 years ago. So I was just like so excited. And then, to kind of go through that, and then people make comments like you're saying, it's like, like you don't know me or my story or like what we're going through. And it can definitely be hurtful. And I think that in that mama community, that's something just to be super more aware of, like not even asking, because then like if you are able to have kids, then everything kind of becomes about the kids, right? Like, how's the baby? How's whatever? Just staying focused on each other in that community. Like, how are you doing? How are things going with you? Like, you don't have to ask, like, when are you having kids? Like, oh, you guys have been married 2 years? That's awesome. How's married life? Like, or what are you guys doing? What are you up to these days? That's
another really great point. No one talks about how isolating postpartum is as well. And I've actually had like made it a point in my head since then to check in on my new mom friends and say, how are you doing? Because no one asks that. no one, everyone's like, how's the baby? Are they sleeping?
Mm-hmm.
It's never, how are you feeling? It's like you're expected to just walk out of the hospital and be recovered. You only get a 6-week checkup. Like, that's it. It's very, I don't know. I don't think there's enough postpartum care
Mm-hmm.
or attention given to those people in the postpartum world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. So once you've got your diagnosis of PCOS, you guys decided then to start kind of doing the fertility treatments right away. What was your avenue of choice, or was there a choice, I guess?
So they recommended Clomid, which is an ovulation induction drug for me. And they kind of made it sound like it was going to be easy peasy. You just take some Clomid and you go in for monitoring. But anyone who doesn't know what monitoring entails, it's, every couple of days throughout your cycle for the whole month, basically, you have to go in from the time you get your period to the time you ovulate, you have to go in for blood tests and ultrasounds.
Wait, every day?
Like probably 2 to 3 times a week.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So because they need to know exactly how many follicles are growing, meaning like eggs. And then if there are they need to know exactly when to give you a trigger shot to force ovulation. It's just very controlled. And then you either do timed intercourse or an IUI, which is intrauterine insemination. So I did a bunch of those cycles, but I think something that no one talks about is that Clomid is really not a fun drug to be on. It's like very, I was very moody and like hot flashes, the whole 9 yards. And so I think a lot goes into IUIs, like almost just as labor intensive as IVF minus the injections. And so I went through probably like 9 months of that.
Wow.
And they just kept being shocked that it wasn't working for me. And I felt like they hadn't really set my expectations. Like I wasn't ready going in for the mental, emotional, time commitment, physical commitment, all of that entailed. Like I didn't know that I would have to slow down my exercise. And like exercise is my one stress reliever and my happy place. And to not, like, all of a sudden I just got married and now I can't do any of the things that I enjoy and I have to be going to all these appointments. Like if there had been more education at the forefront for women about like kind of what goes into it all, like maybe I would have chosen to wait a little while before kind of making that dive in. But then again, it's also the fear of, okay, now I'm up against this diagnosis. I don't know how long it's going to take. What if it takes 5 years? Like, you don't know. So it's a really hard decision to make. I mean, hindsight's 2020, but so yeah, we did about 9 months of IUIs and then I was begging to start IVF. I was like, please let me just do what's going to give me a better chance. And at that point, I thought IVF worked every time. I just thought IVF was a guarantee. And it's not. I mean, but so I had good results from my egg retrieval, but my first embryo transfer failed. And I have no idea why, still to this day. And that was probably my lowest point of my journey because I was 28. I was like, IVF is supposed to work. It works for everyone. And I just didn't know that, you can have the perfect scenario and sometimes IVF, it's not a foolproof thing. But luckily my second frozen embryo transfer, we put 2 embryos in the second time and we got our twins. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it was a lot. It was like over a year of my life and it kind of robbed us a little bit of that newlywed bliss. And it also kind of robbed us of that. And I'm sure you can relate with having lost a pregnancy, but like the little bit of the joy of like that initial shock and joy of finding out you're pregnant, like, cause you're like almost waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're like, is something going to go wrong again?
Mm-hmm.
So it was hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think also with the miscarriage stuff, that's something that I feel like they don't really prepare you for going into it because miscarriage percentages are really high. And that's just not something I feel like when you're talking about, I think we might want to start trying, knowing that there's like such a high chance of that happening. You know, and then, with the second pregnancy, I know for me, I was very unattached for a long time to it. Like even with when my belly started growing, when it was bigger, it wasn't even probably till almost like my last couple months maybe where I was more attached. But even then I was pretty like detached my entire pregnancy. And I feel like that's there's just nothing that can really prepare you going into dealing with infertility, IUI and IVF treatments, like even talking to people. But it's good that you have your resource, because then people aren't alone. Like you said, you can literally look up anything that you're going through, because the people in your circle might not know or might not understand. But knowing somebody who's like, this is what I went through, like I didn't know that Clomid was going to make me feel this way, you know, and going through all that. I don't know the difference between IUI and IVF. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. IUI is intrauterine insemination. So they basically put a catheter with your partner's sperm into your uterus to kind of get it closer to where it needs to go. So it doesn't have to swim as far. But actually the success rates are not that much higher than if you were to just have sex. So I was going through all of that every single month for like a 20-something% rate. Because I think what people don't know is that there's actually only like a 20% chance of you getting pregnant every month, even with no infertility. So for IUIs to boost that only a little bit, I was like begging it by the end for that IVF success rate. IVF is just a lot more controlled. The injection, like the protocol is a lot more straightforward. You know, it's not easy by any means, but you know, you have your egg retrieval. They fertilize the eggs, and then you transfer an embryo back once the egg is fertilized. So, you know, it's just a little bit more controlled and in the lab, and the success rates are higher. So I think at that point I was just ready to do what was going to give me a better chance.
Yeah. Another thing I feel like that nobody really prepares you for going down that road is the cost.
Yes.
And there, I know that some insurance companies cover some, maybe?
Yeah, so it's pretty rare. I was very lucky with my first time around that I worked for a company that had fertility coverage. But so many, it's probably the most common thing I see working in this space is that, you know, so many women, money is such an obstacle for access to treatment. You know, I know a bunch of people who have had to save up for a year before they could start IVF, or IVF just isn't even an option because who has $20,000 laying around? So, you know, it's really, it should be treated like any other disease, but unfortunately it's not. Only certain states have insurance mandates. And yeah, it's really tough. I have a new insurance plan because I left my full-time job in September, and now I'm on my husband's, and I found out that his insurance plan doesn't cover anything at the clinic where we had success. So if I want my embryo storage to be covered whatsoever, I'm going to have to transfer my embryos over to a new clinic and then start over with a new doctor if I wanted to go for baby number 3. But it's such a mind game because like you almost don't want to jinx it because I already had success with this one doctor and my embryos are like all safe in the lab. And I'm like, I don't want to transfer them. I don't want to start all over with a new doctor. But like, do I want to spend thousands of dollars on, you know, another transfer? So I wrote an article once, that I talked about how I think about my embryos every day. And I wrote it like from the perspective of even when you become a mom, like that door is always open because I think you either think to yourself, I'm not getting any younger. Like I obviously had this hurdle for baby number one or babies number one in my case. Am I gonna, if I wait too long for the next one, is it going to be even harder? Or in my case, having embryos, thinking, I have them there, I should probably go back and use them. Because what's the alternative? Like destroying them or giving them up for adoption? It's such a personal dilemma and personal choice, and everyone makes a different one. It's just stuff that people that don't go through this stuff don't have to think about, which that's awesome. But that's not the case for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's something that I feel like, most people wouldn't think of, but you have these potential future children in storage.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's so crazy.
Yeah, it's a dilemma. I think about it a lot. I'm like, what would we do? Obviously, I'm not going to have 9 more children, but not give any of them a shot, So it's just like another layer, I guess. And then I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit about talking about waiting for the other shoe to drop, but my pregnancy wasn't easy either. And when I transferred my embryos back, my doctor kind of warned me about transferring 2 embryos, because twin pregnancies are definitely higher risk, but I had just came off a failed single embryo transfer. And I said, no, I want to increase my chances, like thinking if you put 2 in, hopefully 1 at least will stick. And of course, both stuck. And I wouldn't trade it for the world, but my pregnancy was really tough. And I think that kind of added on to everything, because it was like once I was finally pregnant and like finally past the first trimester and finally enjoying pregnancy, I went into preterm labor at 26 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
And my cervix shortened and was in the hospital and ended up overall in and out, like being in the hospital for about a month of my pregnancy. So I just felt like nothing was easy,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So did you have them at 36 weeks?
I had them at 37 weeks.
37.
So I went into preterm labor at 26, was in the hospital for 2 weeks. Then they sent me home on bed rest. And then 2 weeks later, went back to the hospital, stayed for another 2 weeks. And then at 34 weeks, they were like, I think you're safe to go. Like they weren't expecting me to last that long. But I guess even though my cervix had shortened, it was like they were staying in. So they said, I think it's safe for you to go home now, because if they came now, it wouldn't be life or death. Like it would be okay. They would have some NICU time, but they would be okay. And then I ended up getting induced at 37 weeks because they wanted to stay in. So yeah, I feel very blessed that they ended up not having any NICU time, because after all that time I spent in the hospital, I was sure that they were going to have to spend some time in the hospital. So I always say that like I paid my dues like in the hospital, and then they were able to come home with us, which was like a dream come true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I feel like another question though that people might blindly ask, like if you have twins or triplets, is, oh, did you have to do IVF, or did you are they natural? I've heard somebody say like that question before. It's like, yes, my children are natural.
Yes. I cannot believe how many people actually ask that, like, and mostly total strangers. And I'm like, and I'm kind of, really blunt, and I kind of just like make people uncomfortable and say, no, they were IVF babies, because it really doesn't bother me to be open about it, but I think it kind of makes other people uncomfortable. But I think people need to know that like that's not really an appropriate thing to say. More than anything, I get, do twins run in the family? And then it kind of forces you to be like, no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I mean, twins don't even have to run in the family for twins to happen either.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's such a weird question.
It's again, one of those People say to fill the silence.
Yeah. I interviewed a lady a couple years ago who has triplets, and she said people would say that to her all the time. And when they'd be like, oh, like, did you have, like, are they natural? She'd be like, no, they're robots. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, it's funny. People even ask me if my boy-girl twins are identical. That's always a good one.
I guess I wouldn't know how that works either. I mean, obviously they're different.
Yeah. It's just funny. I secretly like love all the twin stuff. Like I wouldn't have it any other way, but it's like my own inside joke. And when those people, randomly say things to me on the street.
Which kind of blows my mind, because I feel like I would just never randomly say something to someone on the street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I get a lot of the random on the street comments are, you have your hands full, which has always kind of rubbed me the wrong way, only because like I waited for this for so long. And to me, it's like double the blessing, like not double the work. Although, it is really hard, but I try not to. I think all of the obstacles definitely made me see the roses a little bit more as a mom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you feel like since you, struggled with infertility after having the babies, the early postpartum is so hard? And I know for me, I've definitely, struggled, I think, the normal amount. It did get to a point where she was going through her like 4-month sleep regression, where I was starting to like get angry because she was waking up like 6 times a night. And it would be to the point where I would like just wake up and be pissed. Like, I need sleep. I can't do this. Like, I just felt so triggered by, just by her waking up and then reminding myself she's a baby. Like, this is going to happen. But I mean, did you feel at all, just for the people listening who have had similar journeys, like after having the babies, when you're really struggling and it's hard, kind of feeling like that guilt of like, well, I'm triggered by this, but I went through so much to get it?
Oh, absolutely. I had like a pretty traumatic postpartum. I had a pretty traumatic birth. I gave birth to so the whole time I didn't really have a birth plan per se, which I guess is a big no-no now, but I sort of didn't want to psych myself out.
Yeah.
I just said to myself, if they're both head down, I will try to have a vaginal birth. So they were both head down the entire time, and I got induced, had a really great epidural. My daughter came out like super easily. If she was my only birth, I would have been like, that was easy. Let's do it again. Mm-hmm. But then my son would not come out. Mm. And so I had to have an emergency C-section for him. So I had like the whole double whammy birth. But the thing that messed me up, I think, was that I had already had an epidural for the vaginal portion. And then they had to, I guess so much time had elapsed that they had to give me more anesthesia for the C-section. And I basically vomited the entire time.
Oh my gosh.
And then once I knew he was out and had cried, I blacked out and woke up like hours later. And so then I was just messed up on lots of pain meds and, didn't, like, my mom and my aunt and my dad and, people that had come to visit actually like met the twins before I did, because I was just out for the count. So that was tough, because I think you picture that moment, like I pictured my baby shower, and then my baby shower got canceled because I was in the hospital. And then you picture that moment that like your baby's laid on your chest, and I didn't have that moment either. And I don't think that that's portrayed enough. Like, all these perfect images on social media with the baby laying on their chest and skin to skin. And I just didn't have that. And that in the moment, it was like, I was just grateful they were here and healthy. I'm not going to say like I was upset about it in the moment, but I think it definitely left something to be desired. Like I felt like I had gone through so much and I didn't even get that. And then I really had a tough recovery because I had, both the vaginal and a C-section, and I needed to ask for help in those first couple weeks, which I hadn't wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother-in-law ended up coming for like 2 weeks, and my mom helped out. And I don't know, you think you just want to do it all yourself, and then I couldn't. And so that was a big thing. And then I actually had a postpartum hemorrhage 10 days after I gave birth and ended up back in the hospital. So needed even more like extended help. And so, yeah, I sort of feel like it was all kind of a blur. And then when I finally was home from my postpartum hemorrhage, like no more hospital visits, I just really felt anxious. Like all of these bad things had happened. And really, I've been very lucky in my life. Like I hadn't really experienced a lot of like trauma or anything before all this, but like then I went through a year of infertility, and then my pregnancy was really scary. And then my birth and postpartum experience was really scary. So I had been through like a year and a half of just like straight, or more than that, of just straight, disappointment, or just like not the way things were supposed to go. And so then I just got this overwhelming rush of anxiety that like, was something going to happen to my babies, or, what makes me think I can get out of this unscathed, So sometimes I feel like I'm being too dramatic when I go through the whole story, because it sounds like a bad dream. But I mean, I try to think like I'm just so happy that they're here and healthy, and they're, healthy little toddlers now. But in that moment when you're postpartum, I really was really anxious, and I ended up going on medication, and I still think it was the best thing I ever did. And I'm still on it just because I kind of like who I am on it. Because, it just takes the edge off a little. Like the COVID situation might have been a lot more anxiety provoking if it wasn't for a little bit of Zoloft. But
yeah, I could see that for sure.
I try not to be ashamed of it, because like, I think you need to function as a mom, and you need to, like, it's not just you anymore. It's little people depending on you. So
there is no shame in it. And I know in our Facebook group, a lot of moms have openly shared, that they got on medication and that it's helped them so much. And I think that the stigma around, taking control of your mental health and the stigma around infertility both just kind of need to like be gone. That's why I love having conversations about this, because when these things are normalized, then maybe you don't get those random inappropriate questions, that people say, or it's just, people are just more aware of it. I think a lot more people are taking medication than you probably think. Like this mom who looks like she has it all together, on her highlight reel on Instagram. I guarantee you she does not have it all together.
Yeah, exactly. And it's important I actually have an entire section on my site dedicated to pregnancy and motherhood after infertility or loss, just because I think the story doesn't always end there. And, women who go through infertility or loss are actually more likely to have postpartum anxiety or depression. And, that secondary infertility diagnosis, like there are so many women out there who feel like they don't have the right to grieve because they already have one child, and they should feel lucky. And, I think just bringing all of this to light, and like as women, being your own advocate is so important. And, the next time around, if there is a next time around for me, like I'm switching OBGYNs, I am getting, a doula or a midwife, or like I'm really going to have people in my corner, because I felt like, not that things would have turned out differently, but I feel like the emotional aspect of a lot of it wasn't met with the right amount of, empathy. Like I had 4 male physicians like towards the end of their career in the hospital with me while I'm like shedding all of the tears that my baby shower was canceled, and they were just like not having it. So, sometimes women just understand women, or, I needed someone in that moment who had been a mom, or I don't know, I think I'll be a little bit more careful about like who I select to be in my corner during that stage.
Mm-hmm.
For baby number 3, if there is one.
Yeah, it is really important. And I'm glad that you brought that up too, because I think it's so important to advocate for yourself. Yes, like medical stuff goes so far, but also, you live in the skin that you live in every single day. So if you feel like something's off or you feel like something's wrong, you have to be the one to advocate for yourself, even if they're like, nope, everything's fine. It's like, you don't know that for sure. And your intuition, I think women just have also this intuition. I'm not going to say men don't have it, because they definitely have some form of it, but it's just different. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I always feel when something's off. And my husband's going to like kill me for saying this. Whenever he feels like something's off, he's like, oh my gosh, I have a cold, I'm dying. And like, to me, I'm like, I think it's a little dry in here. I need to turn the humidifier on, and I need to like make some tea, like.
So. The same goes for mother's intuition. My mom always said that to me growing up, and I never got it until now. Like, you just have this like sixth sense or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I feel like talking about kind of the mother's intuition, I think that also might be something that people grieve postpartum as well, is because you're kind of taught like you're going to become a mother and you're just going to know. Like, you're a mom and you're just going to know how to do things. Like, you got this. And yes, there definitely comes that intuition and you have these motherly instincts, but it doesn't all come into perfect line for everybody. And you don't just know. Like, even now there's so many things I don't know that like nobody tells you. And I'm learning all the time, and I don't just know how to do these things for my baby. I Google stuff all the time because I'm like, I don't know what to do about this. And I think that that's something that a lot of moms might grieve too, is like not having that immediate connection, or not knowing, you have to learn your baby's needs and they're learning how to try to communicate to you. And so you might feel like, oh, I don't have this motherly instinct or intuition, but we're all so new at it at the beginning.
Yeah. And I think the biggest misconception, or I guess what I thought was going to happen, was that they were going to be like little 5 or 6 month olds, like on my hip from the very beginning, like bouncing around and laughing. And like, that's what I had in my mind, but newborns do nothing.
Right.
And so I was like waiting for, it's kind of boring sometimes. Like, I was waiting for them to like do something, and I don't want to use the word boring because it's not boring, but it's like doing a lot of other stuff to take up your time. But it's, they're not laughing yet. They're not reacting to a lot of what you're doing. I was reading them books and I'd be like, I feel like I'm reading to myself.
Yeah. I just remember when she was a newborn, they have like the giggles in their sleep. Like, she'd be sleeping and be like, that was like the cutest thing, but that's like about it, like that's, then they just like sleep and whatever. But yeah, I mean, as soon as then they, when they start reacting to you and start smiling back at you, and yeah, it gets so much fun. But I feel like, so much of what we've talked about today, like, hasn't necessarily, like, what are some other things that maybe people don't know going into it that the Fertility Tribe kind of touches on?
I think, the biggest thing is just that all paths to motherhood are valid options, and that, you have to do what's best for you, and that, everyone's situation is so different. Everyone's up against something different. Everyone has a different partner that, that's a whole other part of the equation. And I think it's important to validate, for your emotions to be let out. Like, you need to grieve, like, you're allowed to grieve. Your feelings are valid. And, find your tribe, like find your support system, because who actually knows how to support you the way that you need to. And if they can't, then tell them how they can. And then like, it's okay to take a break. It's very time consuming. It's very all in, encompassing. And yeah, I guess that's just what I wish I had known, is like just everything that goes into it, that it's okay to be sad. It's okay to grieve, but you kind of have to put one foot in front of the other if you want to pursue parenthood. But I guess I wish I had known that like IVF is not the last resort. I always thought it was. Like, I was so scared to start IVF initially because I thought if IVF doesn't work, then that's it. But now I know that, if IVF doesn't work with your eggs, you can use donor eggs. If donor eggs don't work, you can do embryo adoption. You can do surrogacy. If you are having trouble carrying a child, you can adopt. But adoption is not a cure for infertility. That is one of the biggest things. So many people that are just unknowing or ignorant, I guess, they will be like, why don't you just adopt? And like, I think it's such an inherent, if you want to be a mom, like you want to be a mom, but like there's a whole grieving process about being able to not have your own biological child. And adoption doesn't just like make that go away. Adoption can fill your heart in so many ways. And that is an amazing path to parenthood that many people take, but it doesn't necessarily like take away the grief of infertility. Like I ran an article once, she's an amazing adoptive mom, but it said it didn't really take away her desire to also have her own biological child. So, but just knowing that everyone has a story, and it's not always easy. Like 9 times out of 10, when I talk to women about this stuff, it's like, oh, I had a miscarriage, or, I struggled to get pregnant, or I had a complicated pregnancy, or I had postpartum depression. I don't really know a lot of women who are like completely left unscathed by like any of these things. So that's why we need to talk about it, because the few that are, that's amazing. I want to be you in a next life.
Yeah. It is kind of that picture, like you said, just having your babies bouncing on your hips and like, I mean, I had the vision for how I wanted my birth to go, and it didn't, it was still an amazing experience, but I do have a little bit of trauma that I need to work through from it. And I honestly, like I've told my husband so many times, like, we definitely want more children. And I'm like, I'm so afraid I'm not going to be able to like give birth to them. Like, I'm just going to be in my head, because I totally got in my head with the last one. And it just, I mean, it can go so many different ways, but I'm like, I just have a feeling that when it comes to like the labor, I'm just going to completely freak out,
I can really relate to that, because it was more the postpartum hemorrhage really scared me to a point where I sometimes think, is having another baby like worth possibly losing my life, which I know that is not going to happen, knock on wood. But, it's like when you're losing that much blood and you're Googling, like after the fact I was Googling and it said postpartum hemorrhage is the #1 cause of maternal mortality. I was like, I didn't even know this was a thing. And I don't think it would happen if I had a singleton pregnancy, or even if I had another twin pregnancy. Like, I think they would be more on the lookout for it. We know that I have a history of it, but still, it's a trauma, and you sort of like prepare yourself for that to happen again, because it's just there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what, I guess, for people listening who might be, might have an infertility diagnosis and kind of going through all that, do you have any words of comfort for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's every single step along the way will teach you and your doctors more about your body and what will work for you and what won't work for you. I used to think a failed cycle was just a failed cycle and a negative pregnancy test, but really every failed cycle teaches the doctor so much. And, there's so many things that can be done, and science is amazing. Mm-hmm. And, you'll get your baby one way or the other if you really want to, but it's also okay to walk away. Like, there are many women in the larger community that, have decided to be child-free because they just didn't want to do it anymore. And they wanted to find joy in their lives that wasn't surrounded by just like the stress of trying to conceive. And that's okay too. So you kind of need to do what's best for you. But if you want to be a parent, you will make it happen one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then where can people follow you and connect with you at?
Yeah, so it's thefertilitytribe.com. And if you do /community, that's where you can find all about our free infertility support community and app. And it's the Fertility Tribe on Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kristyn, for coming on and for sharing with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed the interview. Make sure that you connect with her community and just check out their website. Like she said, you can literally Google anything. Not Google, search on her website, anything dealing with infertility, and you will find an article, somebody who's been through it, just topics to read and educate yourself on. It's such a great resource. You guys, this next weekend is Valentine's Day weekend. I do not know how you are celebrating. I don't know how I'm celebrating it. And it's a tradition in my family to make these heart-shaped sugar cookies. I'm going to try to make a healthy recipe of them, so we'll see how they turn out. But the key is the frosting, which is made with powdered sugar. So I'm not sure how I can make that healthy, but I might not do it. But that's usually what I grew up doing, making these awesome heart-shaped sugar cookies, and you decorate them, you write people's names on them. But the only other tradition that Vito and I have for Valentine's Day is he has to cook for me. And I just, love him. So he cooks for me every Valentine's Day, which is super sweet. And he always does an awesome job. I hope you guys have a great Valentine's Day weekend. Spread some love, but be safe. And I love you guys, and we'll talk to you next week.
If you want to be the most interesting person at the cocktail party, well, hop on over and listen to the Brain Candy podcast.
Our award-winning content will have you laughing while you're learning.
We read all the best articles, books, and studies, and keep up with new TV shows, documentaries, and pop culture. And then we cram it all into 2 shows a week.
Conspiracy theories, cannibal rabbits, unsolved mysteries, the history of the Walkman. There's something for everyone.
The Brain Candy podcast. Find our link in the show notes.
Or simply search for the Brain Candy podcast on your podcast app.